Students, there is a Unit 5 quiz. So when you click on Unit 5 and you scroll all the way to the bottom, you see 5.07 Project 4 Unit Review and Quiz. Click on that, right click, open the link in a new window, start your quiz, size it down so you can see just enough of the quiz that you can read the question and you have a scroll bar. And then size your other window down so that you can watch this video and do the quiz at the same time. Perfect. So we're going to go up to the top, 5.01. And hopefully you've already created the assignment and you made this Generi rig do a walk cycle. Let's read the questions. Question 1, what is an object's center of gravity? The point where an object is equally balanced, the object's pivot point, the points where controller bones connect with the regular bones, the area of constraint on a controller bone. Question 2, the blank pose is when the character's center of gravity is at its lowest point and the character is leaning fully into the forward walk motion. Is this the high point, contact, recoil, or passing? Question 3. In a walk cycle animation, what is slippage? When the character's feet appear to slide around, when the animation has been sped up too fast so it looks unnatural, when a character jumps back to the starting location instead of continuing its forward motion, when the controller bones stop working. Question 4. What is forward motion? When the character's knee bends up, when the character loops forward, when a reference point is created, movement in a direction in space when a person is walking. Question 5. The blank pose is where one foot is flat on the ground with a straighter leg. High point, contact, recoil, or passing. Let's find out. The Generi rig character. A rig is a 3D model that has been set up with a skeleton of bones inside to make it easier to animate. The Generi rig character is a 3D model that is already rigged with bones and parent-child relationships so that its body parts move together. In this lab, you'll learn how to move the Generi rig character into different poses. Later in the project, you'll make an animation of the character walking. Controller bones are special bones that work as handles for moving a 3D model. Parent-child relationships let them control the movement of regular bones inside the model or vertices on the model's surface skin. Controller bones are set up outside a character's body to make them easier to grab and move. A constraint is a limit. Controller bones often have constraints that limit the model's movement to a realistic range. Generi's rig controller bones. The Generi rig model is already set up with controller bones for you to work with. The regular bones inside the model are hidden because you won't need to use them. They move automatically when you move a controller bone. For example, when you move the foot controller bone, the hidden bones inside the model will move too, which makes the foot and leg move. The controller bones have different shapes. Question: where are the Generi rig model's controller bones located? Inside the model, outside the model, inside the regular bones, or under the model's surface skin? The answer is outside the model. The Move All controller bone. The Move All controller bone moves the position of the entire character without changing its pose. You'll use it when you want to move the character from one location to another. In top view, the Move All controller bone looks like a blue hexagon under the character. The Center of Gravity controller bone. COG stands for center of gravity. The center of gravity is the point where an object is equally balanced, like the middle of a seesaw. A person has a center of gravity too, and it changes as the person moves. The COG controller bone controls the model's center of gravity. In top view, it looks like a star shape. What is an object's center of gravity? The point where an object is equally balanced, the object's pivot point, the points where controller bones connect with regular bones, or the area of constraint on a controller bone. Can you see the answer here? The point where an object is equally balanced, like the middle of a seesaw. Clear transform. By this point, your character might look pretty strange. On the next page, you'll use the clear transform commands to get it back to normal. Clear transform is the group of commands that let you reset the location, rotation, and scaling of a rigged character to its default or resting state. If you've added a keyframe, it will reset the location, rotation, or scaling to that keyframe. You'll use clear location and clear rotation to reset the rig's pose on the next page. Feet and hands. The feet and hands are the most important part of creating a walk cycle. Click the buttons to learn more. The foot controller bones are ovals under the feet. When you move a foot controller bone, the foot and leg move. When you rotate the bone, the foot rotates without moving the leg much. The hand controller bones are cubes around the wrists. When you move a hand controller bone, the hand and arm move. When you rotate the bone, the hand rotates while the arm remains still. Head controller bones. There are 3 main controller bones for the head area. Head. In the front view, the head controller bone looks like an arch over the character's head. You'll use this bone to rotate the head. When you move this bone, the eyes stay pointed toward the face controller bone. Face. The face controller bone is shaped like a happy face in front of the character's face. Depending on what view you're using, you can use the face controller bone to make the character look up and down or side to side. Eye. The eye controller bone is shaped like an eye in the center of the face controller bone. When you move the eye controller bone, only the eyes will move. The 4 rows of boxes above the character's head contain controller bones for different areas of the face. The asterisks are the controller bones. The boxes around them show the limits on how far they can be moved. When you move the asterisks, it changes the face's expressions in different ways. You won't need the face controls to make the walk cycle, but they can be fun to change. Skeleton layers. You use layer buttons to hide extra object layers. You also hide armature layers to hide more of the extra controller bones. An armature is a chain of connected bones, so a skeleton layer is a special type of layer that's used just for bones. Question: a skeleton layer is used just for bones. The action editor helps you keep track of which bones have keyframes on which frames. It lists all the bones that are being used in an animation with yellow dots on the timeline for each keyframe. The action editor does not show you what type of keyframes they are, nor show you what changes between the keyframes, as the F-curve editor does. Automatic keyframe insertion creates location, rotation, and scaling keyframes on a frame whenever a selected object is moved. If you pose the object again, automatic keyframe insertion will overwrite the keyframe that was already there. This is helpful when you want to add a keyframe every time you create a pose. When you don't want a keyframe to be created whenever you pose something, you turn it off. If you save your project and close it, when you reopen it, you'll need to turn on automatic keyframe insertion again. When automatic keyframe insertion is on, it creates a new keyframe automatically whenever you hide an armature layer, show an object layer, change the view, or D, move the object. Walk cycles. Think about the way a human walks. One leg takes a step forward, then the other, over and over. A walk cycle is one full cycle of steps where a character takes a step with one leg and then a step with the other leg. The body naturally lowers when a leg steps forward and rises back up when the legs are together. In this project, you'll animate a character to do one full walk cycle, then you'll repeat the cycle over and over so the character walks. What is a walk cycle? A group of characters that walk around quickly. A full cycle of steps where a character takes a step with one leg and then the other. Correct answer is B. The walk cycle poses. A full walk cycle includes 2 steps, one with each leg. This means that each leg goes through the same set of poses. Click the buttons to see the poses you'll create in the walk cycle. 1. Contact. In the contact pose, one foot has just stepped forward and is hitting the ground. Recoil. The character is at its lowest point, leaning fully into the forward walk motion. Notice both feet are flat on the ground. Passing pose. In the passing pose, the second foot has started to take a step and is just at the point of passing by the first foot on its way forward. The high point. pose is when the forward moving leg has reached its highest point before coming down. So that knee is bent and the leg is lifted up. Question 2. The blank pose is when the character's center of gravity is at its lowest point and the character is leaning fully into the forward motion. Did you find the answer? And then question 5. The blank pose is where one foot is flat on the ground with a straighter leg. I'm pretty sure that's going to be the high point, but yeah, because the other ones don't have a straighter leg, huh? There you go. The animation plan. In this lab, you pose the character's head, feet, and legs for the contact pose on frame 1, where the left foot steps forward. You move the character's head down to a more natural-looking pose. You lower the character's center of gravity, controller bone, to give the legs more room to move. You move the left foot forward, then rotate the left foot upward until the heel is starting to hit the ground. You move the right foot backward. That's your contact pose. The contact pose is the moment in the walk cycle when the forward moving foot first touches the ground. Touching the ground is also called making contact with the ground. In your animation, the left foot will be in the forward contact position first, and the right foot will be behind the character and getting ready to lift off the ground. Thus, the contact pose. Which of these images is the contact pose? 4. The foot is just making contact. After you finish the contact pose, then you pose the arms, shoulders, and hips. You move the arms downward and then rotate the hands downward. You move the right arm forward and the left arm back so they swing a little. You rotate the hips towards the front foot. You rotate the shoulders toward the backward foot. Lowering the arms, the Generi rig model looks unnatural with its arms up because people don't normally stand and walk around with their arms in the air. On the next page, you lower the arms to the model's side to give it a more natural looking position. Swinging the arms. When a person walks, his arms usually swing opposite to the movement of his feet. When the left leg is forward, the right arm swings forward. When the left leg is back, the right arm swings back. Question: in a contact pose, if the right leg is stepping forward, which arm will be swinging forward with it? The correct answer is B, the left arm, the opposite arm. Shoulder and hip rotation. When a person walks, his shoulders and hips rotate forward and back along with the movement of his arms and legs. The shoulders rotate with the arms in the opposite direction from the feet. The hips rotate in the same direction as the legs and feet. Without shoulder and hip rotation, a walk cycle looks stiff and unnatural. Flipping a pose. The contact pose you created will be the first frame of the walk cycle's animation. Now that it's complete, you can make a flipped copy of it to create the contact pose for the other foot. The contact pose and its flip copy are mirror images to one another. The flip copy will be the opposite of the first pose, so the right leg will be stepping forward instead of the left leg. Forward motion. When a person walks, he or she moves in a direction in space. This movement is called forward motion. What is forward motion? When a character's knee bends up, when the character loops forward, when a reference point is created, movement in a direction in space, when a person is walking. "3D cursor as a reference point. The 3D cursor stays in place between frames. This makes it useful for creating a reference point when you need to keep track of where things are and where they will be in a future keyframe, or where they were in a past keyframe. You'll use the 3D cursor as a reference point for the forward motion in the walk cycle. Animation plan. Finish the contact pose. Pose the arms and shoulders and hips. Stage 1, you'll create the passing pose. In this pose, the left foot flattens and the right foot moves up off the ground, getting ready to pass, thus the passing pose. Stage 2, you'll examine your animation closely to make sure the foot on the ground isn't sliding around. If it is, you'll fix it. Stage 3, you'll create the high point pose. In this pose, the right foot is at its highest point before coming back down to the ground. Stage 4, you'll set the recoil pose by moving the character's hips down to their lowest point. The left foot is flat on the ground and the right foot is lifted fully off the ground. The left foot is flat on the ground and the right foot is lifted. All right. Okay. Doesn't look like it's lifted fully to me, but I can't argue. Passing pose. The passing pose is midway between the two contact poses. It's when the forward moving foot is moving past the other foot on its way toward taking a step. In this pose, one foot is flat on the ground with a straighter leg. This makes the body rise up so the center of gravity is at a higher point. Look at that. The blank pose is where one foot is flat on the ground with a straighter leg. One foot is flat on the ground with a straighter leg. So even though in the pictures it looked like it was, I think it looked like it was the high point, the real answer is passing pose. So sometimes you can't look at the pictures and tell what this is trying to explain to you, can you? The forward moving foot is lifted off the ground as it passes by the straight leg and foot. There's nothing straight looking about that leg. Which of these images is the passing pose? Well, you can tell that this one is the passing pose right here, right? Because it's just this left foot is flat and the right foot is just lifting up and getting ready to take that step forward. So, 2. Slippage. In a walk cycle animation, slippage is when a character's feet appear to slide around. This doesn't look quite right, so it's important to fix it when it happens. Slippage happens when a foot on the ground moves forward or backward between keyframes. A foot on the ground should stay in place. To fix the slippage in your walk cycle, you make sure that the left foot is in the same place from frames 11 to 21. All right, I know there's a question on slippage in here. In a walk cycle animation, what is slippage? When the character's feet appear to slide around. When the animation has been sped up too fast. When a character jumps back to the starting location. When the controller bones stop working. What does it say? Slippage is when a character's feet appear to slide around. High point pose. The high point pose follows the passing pose. It's when the forward moving foot has swung forward to its highest point before it hits the ground in the next contact pose. This is when the character is at its tallest and the center of gravity reaches its highest point because the heel of the grounded foot is lifting up from the ground. Which of these images is the high point pose? Number 1. Recoil pose is between the first contact pose and the passing pose. In this pose, the character is at its lowest point when it is leaning fully into the forward walk motion. This is when the character's center of gravity is at its lowest because the knee of the grounded foot is the most bent it will be. Which of these images is the recoil pose? Image 3. Center of gravity is at its lowest. The knees are bent. And it's leaning into the walk. Forward motion cycle. Keyframe review. Frame 1. This is the first contact pose. Ding, contact. The left foot has just touched the ground with the right foot on the ground behind. Frame 6. This is the first recoil pose. The left foot is flat on the ground with the knee very bent and the right foot is lifting up off the ground. Frame 11. This is the first passing pose. The left foot is still flat on the ground, but the leg is straightened somewhat, and the right foot is starting to move past it. Frame 16. This is the first high point pose. The heel of the left foot is lifting up off the ground and the right foot is reaching forward, still in the air. Frame 21. This is the second contact pose. It's the opposite of the contact pose on frame 1 because the right foot has just touched the ground with the left foot on the ground behind. Completing the cycle. So far you created about half of the walk cycle. To make the other half, you create mirrored copies of the poses. You paste them later in the timeline and further forward in 3D space. The 3D cursor helps you decide how far forward to move the character. The pose on the last keyframe is going to match exactly with the contact pose on frame 1, bringing the animation to full circle back where it started. Animation plan. In this lab, you'll create mirrored copies of the poses. The pose on the last frame matches exactly the contact pose on frame 1, bringing the animation around full circle back to where it started. In stage 1, you copy and paste a mirrored image of the recoil pose. The mirrored pose has the right foot flat on the ground with the left foot lifted fully off the ground. In stage 2, you copy and paste a mirrored copy of the passing pose. The mirrored pose has the right foot flat on the ground with the left foot moving past the right foot. In stage 3, you copy and paste a mirrored copy of the high point pose. The mirrored pose has the right foot on the ground with the heel lifted up off the ground and the left foot moving forward. And then in stage 4, you copy and paste the first contact pose to the end without mirroring it. This way, the first and last frames will be the same, so the animation can loop. Continuing forward motion. Earlier in the project, you added forward motion between the first and second contact poses. To do that, you moved the new pose forward in 3D space using the 3D cursor as a reference point. After you added the new pose, you made sure that there was no slippage between the poses. Looping animations. On the next page, you copy the first contact pose to the end of the animation to make sure they match exactly. In the first and last frames, if they're identical, the animation will be able to loop smoothly so that it can repeat over and over without glitches. If there is a difference between the first and last pose, you'll see a glitch each time the animation loops. Keyframe review. Click the buttons to review the frames you created. Frame 1 was the first contact pose. Frame 6 was the first recoil pose. Frame 11 was the first passing pose. Frame 16 was the first high point pose. Frame 21 was the second contact pose. Frame 26 was the second recoil pose. Frame 31 was the second recoil pose. No, that should say passing pose. Frame 31 is the second passing pose. Frame 36 is the second high point pose. And frame 41 is the third contact pose, and it matches the first contact pose exactly. And that concludes the quiz. Go ahead and save all your responses and submit your quiz. Good job!